side, we have Hillwood College Kandy Team A. Additionally, we have a 3-member panel, which includes Sandhya Ranasinghe, who will be the co-adjudicator, and alongside him, we have Chirati Pereira and Danidu Vithanavasam, who will join as panelists. Now, I'd like to cordially invite the adjudicator panel to take over, mention the basic ground rules, and commence the debate.
Thank you. Before we start, can I get a quick verification from the teams if the setups are working? Vishaka Vidyalaya?
We're here.
Okay. HCK?
We're here.
All right, wonderful. I will proceed to share my screen with a timer. I hope it is visible to everyone. That said, I believe the standard rules everyone is aware, but I will nevertheless reiterate. Speeches will be 7 to 8 minutes. You may ask POI starting at 1 minute and up until the 7th minute. With that said, can I confirm that the other edges are also ready?
Yes, we are good.
All right, wonderful. I invite the Prime Minister to state their case.
Sorry, am I audible if I speak like this?
Yes.
Excuse me, could you be a little bit more audible? We can't hear you. We have connection issues, sorry.
Okay, wait, give me 1 second. Like, bring this closer. So yeah, am I audible now?
Yes. HCK is that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. I'll be starting in 3, 2, and 1. Hannah's Siamese entire Spotify rap was white girl music. We think that at the end of the day, the fact that she can't even name proper Sinhala artists is an issue. It's like the fact that local artists, local culture is dying out. This is inherently harmful. Our culture is dying out because of American dominance, and we oppose this. But a few points are set up before my 3 arguments. Firstly is the fact that we need to prove to you that American pop culture has caused some sort of harm in society right now. The dominance of it has caused harm, not necessarily how local culture is going to propagate now, but the harm that has been caused as of right now. Second point then, on US pop culture itself. A, we think it looks like direct consumption of art, like music, movies, or fashion. But B, it means following celebrities who are American, who promote things like American ideals and talk about American issues. But this also therefore C means that social issues are portrayed in the lens of American ideals, and whatever is portrayed in these types of media are going to be portrayed in a way that is beneficial for the US and is good for the US. But the third thing under setup then is on this aspect of global dominance. We don't think that this just means that everyone watches it, but it also means that you actively prioritize it over other forms of media, as in local media or whatever. Why? And this is harmful because A, individuals actively choose this over others, but B, because a large market share of this exists for the USA, and the USA is able to get a huge amount of market shares because of this US pop culture. The result here is that there's more demand for these sorts of things in within society globally, but also the fact that algorithms, social media actively pushes these sorts of things because the market is heavily saturated with American media to begin with. The opportunity cost there is that people consume other forms of media less, and they have to bite that bullet and concede that. But then fourth point of setup is that why this is the USA is simply the fact that it is the one with the monopoly that exists right now. It holds a certain amount of monopoly. But then the last point of setup then is on like our counterfactual then is the fact that we don't believe that US should be dominant in terms of media. We think you should prioritize your own local culture the same way that Americans right now prioritize their own culture. We think that is what's important, and we think the cost of not doing that is your own culture itself. But then three arguments for the House. Firstly, on culture and local markets. Secondly, on social like justice. Thirdly, on the quality of US media. First argument then on culture and like local markets. The framing here is that there's a significant usage and consumption of American media, and that means that there's an opportunity cost in terms of the other like local culture that you're consuming, the media you're consuming there. On a first level, I want to talk about the lack of awareness of your own culture. Why does this happen? A, because social media actively pushes you into watching things like American culture or looking at media that is like American, pushed by America. But B, it's because the majority of things that exist in terms of music or fashion or whatever are basically US-led things, are based of like US-led things. But C is that there's a certain amount of social pressure that exists for you to actively choose these types of media over everything else. The comparison on our end is that one, you're able to explore your own culture now because you don't have this other thing that is hanging there. But two is simply the fact that the social pressure to consume like US media doesn't exist on our end of the house. That means you're able to watch and explore other types of media within your own culture without feeling like you're being left out for not watching the last like Zootopia movie or whatever. But then on a second level, I want to talk about elitism, right? Because we think elitism happens due to because of like this culture for a few reasons. One is simply the fact that you actively put America on a pedestal. Two is because of these types of media constantly winning awards and global awards, you put them on a pedestal. But three is simply the fact that you coin American media to be something that is cool at the end of the day. This results in two types of shame. One is the internal shame that occurs because the moment you choose something that is a part of your culture, for example, like wearing a sari or whatever, is the moment you feel shame. You don't feel as cool as everyone else because everyone else is wearing things that are American because American media has influenced fashion to that extent. But internally too, you feel like a sense of shame for participating in cultural activities because you feel like not posh enough or whatever. But then I want to talk about external shame also because we think among like social circles also, you're constantly ostracized for prioritizing your own culture. You're seen as someone who is backwards or whatever and not someone who is cool enough to be a part of these like types of social circles. And we think this is extremely detrimental. But third level then on industries, local industries, we think local artists are unable to come up because things like fashion, music or whatever is completely dominated by American markets. They think they need to Americanize themselves to also be able to be as popular. B is simply the fact that they lack funding that exists. You're not going to fund like a sitar player the same amount that you would fund someone who is doing like American music at the end of the day. In the eyes of the people, when people aren't actively watching these sorts of things, you lose out on funding. But see, the unrealistic standards you have set because of American media having so much funding means that local artists don't have the same amount of funding. Therefore, they're not able to compete with these US artists, US fashion designers or whatever because they don't have the funds. They have like insane competition that they cannot in any way get ahead of. The impact here is that there's money drained drastically from your own country at the end of the day because your industries are unable to go about. But then why is like local culture so important? And I want to justify this before I move on to my next arguments, right? A is the fact that local culture is the one thing you can do better than the USA indefinitely because you are the only person who has a proper understanding of this culture. That means you're the only one who can promote it in the way that it deserves to. But B is simply the fact that the market dies out in terms of local artists. So the sitar players won't have like a market in the future anyways. But see, things like cultural values are going to die out and you're not going to prioritize things like your own cultural values. But in terms of history or whatever, those things are going to go unremembered because people don't portray it. But then lastly, in terms of diversity, we just think that at the end of the day, we're going to have a better world that's more beautiful because you have like more diverse cultures that are able to succeed regardless. But then I want to move on to my second argument then on social justice. I want to point out in framing that social issues are something that are circulated through social media. The only way you can garner enough attention for these sorts of things, the status quo, is through things like social media. On a first level, I want to talk about how local issues are underrepresented on that side of the house because we think the mechanism here is that celebrities and movies actively promote and talk about things that the US specifically goes through. For example, then we are far more likely to know more about like the Black Lives Matter movement than we are about like LTTE history in Sri Lanka itself. This is because you're actively following celebrities and movies that actively promote these things. So local issues don't get the amount of education. But then what does this result in real life? And that's our second level on real life behavior. is simply the fact that it shapes conversations. So you're far more likely to talk about Mandani in like New York or whatever because we just did that as opposed to a local politician. But then in terms of behavior, you're just far more likely to behave in the ways that US media promotes. So that could be things like being more violent or being more exposed to drugs or whatever. That's something you can also do. But see, in terms of like political choices as well, we think you're just going to be far less aware in terms of social issues. You're going to vote far worse on our side of the house, on their side of the house, because you don't have the amount of awareness that we're able to cater to you. On a third level, I want to talk about political issues because we think US media uniquely now has an advantage because A, they're able to manipulate things in like the world. For example, like conflicts between Israel and Palestine, that's when they're able to garner attention and manipulate things that suits their own views. But B, there's no accountability there because we all view America as the good guy, and I'm going to justify this later onwards as well. And the impact here is that you're able to shift the views of the people, even if it's like the wrong thing, because people put the USA on a pedestal and think whatever they're doing is right because that's how they're portrayed in media. Third argument then on the quality of media. On a first, I want to talk about bad representation. A, we think things like stereotypes are far more likely. So even if they get a certain amount of representation in US media, the people like Indians or whatever are constantly represented with like bad Indian accents. Whatever you do, you're represented wrong on their side of the house. But B, they're used as like comedy relief characters, so there's no proper representation there. Characters like Sofia Vergara are represented horribly. But then see, counter influences are needed to counter battle this. Like for example, right now, Tyler having a concert in India is when like people started commenting, talking about how India has baddies or whatever. And that's the moment at which you're able to get rid of stereotypes like this because you promote music and the fact that media and pop culture exists within these other countries. But then on a second level, I want to talk about toxicity of like US media to begin with. A, we think it glorifies things like violence, drugs, and sex at the end of the day. But B, it represents USA as the good guy regardless. You put it on a pedestal, you say it's a good guy. The impact here is that no one questions the USA when they're doing something bad because in the eyes of you, you think the USA is the good guy. So regardless, you support them. For these reasons, so proud to propose.
Thank the speaker for their speech. Invite the opposition leader to state their case.
Can I have 90 seconds, please? Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I probably won't be able to turn on my camera because we're experiencing connection issues right now. But just to clarify, am I clearly audible to everyone?
Yes.
Okay. I do not take POIs verbally. Please put all POIs in the chat. I'll probably take one either after my setup or between my two arguments. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel in a world where our lives have been made better by things like American shows, things like American music, and even the borderline brain rot type shit of like 6-7, we believe American pop culture is an overall good thing. We are proud to uphold. Set up the movie to response and argumentation. 4 things here. Firstly, pop culture is entertainment and media that's spread through mass media that's internalized by individuals who consume said media. Pop culture, therefore, is most likely to affect younger individuals and to be created by younger individuals. This is pop culture in the first place and have access to the platforms that create pop culture, right? Like it's not first place, and have access to the platforms that create pop culture, right? Like it's not like some ancient grandma is going to be.
There are also like negative stereotypes that they do portray. For example, making sure that the Indian accent is taken as the comedy relief in a movie, which means the cost at which they the cost that's put into the liberalism that they try to achieve inherently is like higher. The reason then as to why like Indian, for example, Indian stereotypes or South American stereotypes are portrayed without negatively portraying LGBTQ or like racial Black Lives Matter stereotypes is because firstly the LGBTQ movement exists like right now in the status quo. You don't have like an Indian movement fighting for the advocate rights, right? Which means the reason as to why American media portrays the LGBTQ movement better is because the LGBTQ movement shows the American media to do so. This is because there's like a higher because there's high concentration of like from the whole media industry towards American media. This is why the LGBTQ movement itself chose them to do it, and we tell you that this again can be shifted towards other countries. We don't identify why American media in itself is solely needed for this. But secondly, understand that even if there is like liberalism, it only portrays American issues. For example, there are like issues that Tamil people in Sri Lanka faces that aren't represented. Why is this more worse on their side? Because these issues are only likely to be portrayed in countries like Sri Lanka or even like in India. The issues that single people, for example, faces only will be like represented in like Sri Lanka. On their side, it's that these things will be covered up by American media. That's why it is inherently harmful. Thirdly, what is the weighing then in terms of this area? The weighing then is the cost of like the other types of like races that are being that are being pushed to just because to like promote BLM and like LGBTQ is like worse, which means at the end of the day, even in their best case, the harm in itself is symmetrical. What's worse then is on their side, you're portraying liberalism to be solved. Like the point at which portrayal of LGBTQ and BLM is there, people believe that portrayal of liberalism is done enough. That's what Apurva believes. That's what Hillwood believes. This is the point at which we tell you it's not true, because there are so many minorities that aren't being represented because only American issues are represented. But B, understand that even if everything they said is true in terms of representation is true, understand that this only benefits the people in America. For example, firstly, LGBTQ people in Sri Lanka won't feel represented and they won't feel like connected because you will be showing a white woman who's like gay, which means me, if I was gay, for example, I wouldn't feel connected to like this type of media because I feel like it's a very Western thing. I can never achieve that freedom that people in USA would. Their argumentation on liberalism does not stand. Secondly, in terms of how it's counterproductive, at the end of the day, conservative people are the biggest problem on like both sides to solve liberalism, and they push for liberalism, which means they have to shift the ideology of the conservative people. At the end of the day, that's how they have to win this debate. Why then, at the end of the day, conservative people are more likely to be bent towards like liberalism on our side, because we don't make the problem worse. On their side, the issue right now in status quo is, for example, conservative people in Sri Lanka believes that LGBTQ or rights like that are westernized or like American. The sole reason why they hate on gay people is because they are American in the first place. They are initiating this and they are like making it worse on their side, the point at which it's only represented through American culture, and it's only majorly represented through American culture. Because of this, we just win this clash. They have like no other point to argue. But the second clash then is in terms of like why, in terms of culture, why local culture in itself is better. They tell you local issues are talked over. This is not true. At the end of the day, we know about Donald Trump more than we knew whatever happened to Mahida Rajapaksa back in the 1990s, right? At the end of the day, you don't talk about Sri Lankan politics as much as American politics. Is very much likely in terms of youth who needs to talk about like Sri Lankan politics. But secondly, that is not the only issue that's there in like local culture. Understand that we don't value culture. For example, firstly, we prioritize American culture over like our own culture. For example, buying like Taylor Swift tickets at the end of the day, or buying tickets for Wicked, Zootopia, like Superman, or whatever like Hollywood movie that's there right now, or whatever single film that's there. And I don't even know what the single films that there are right now in cinema. That's the amount of like prioritization I do to Western media, to American media. But secondly, in terms of what like elitism is like higher, understand that you shame Sri Lankan or like your local culture. This is not responded to. Understand that we don't need 6-7 to build community. Higher Hatha is like basically enough at the end of the day. Understand that elitism will not exist on our side, and you can build a community out of like local culture. But thirdly, understand that like on their side, the American like culture is becoming the standard for local culture. It's really hard for them to like reach this. Why then, at the end of the day, should local like local culture be prioritized. Because first, in terms of proximity, like local culture, like you can approach it better. That's why local culture is more important. But secondly, the chance of it vanishing itself is way higher. And why then should you care about it vanishing? Because firstly, you have minorities who care about local culture, like Aditi who plays the sitar. She's probably not going to have a job in the like future where she's planning to be like a sitar player. People like that are important because they value local culture and they're minority, they're more vulnerable. But secondly, people who appreciate local culture, they won't get enough content now. That's like they're more vulnerable. But like the second point is that we can't do it as much as America is doing, which is forever. In terms of culture, Sri Lanka will be behind because if we try to copy America, we can never do it as much as on their side. Understand that they make sure like America thrives at the end of the day. In terms of like the final point I want to make is in terms of like quality of media. Understand the bar you set for local culture is so high that you don't get enough funding at the end of the day. At the end of the day, you promote things like violence and sex, and in terms of like communities also this is worse because even if you do build a community out of like culture and like media, it'll be really harmful, especially towards the youth when you like tell them that doing drugs at the end of the day is like cool. Understand that we don't have a bias in terms of media. We like solve all of the issues that they portray. A lot of things are responded to side with prop.
I thank the speaker for their speech and invite the opposition bit to state their case.
Okay, am I clearly audible if I speak like this?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. With that, I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, understand that 6-7 can solve the world's problems. You just need to try hard enough. But before I move on to my clashes, I just need to like clarify this one thing. Throughout the entirety of their speeches, they have not once proven to us why culture inherently substantively impacts you as a world, you as a person, and how it changes, as opposed to like the women suffering in Pakistan, right? They haven't properly impacted or grounded that stuff. So they have no substantive argumentation. This house who gets proven. So what we need to prove to you is that the American pop culture has given you a proper like net good, more net good as opposed to a net bad. And if we prove to you that there's substantive impactful change that they've never grounded in their argumentation thus far, we win this debate. And but thus far, I think we already have two main clashes for the house today. Number one on culture and media, and number two on social justice, right? I want to start on social justice and like awareness clash first, right? First of all, what do they tell us in the get-go of their speeches? They tell us that local issues are like full-on forgotten. I feel like they live in such a dystopian world. Because think about it, why would one inherently intuitively not want to know about what's happening in your surrounding? Just because like, and another important link you need to understand that suddenly because of the absence of US pop culture doesn't mean you suddenly pull out your history book and start reading about like LTT during your free time. You have no incentive. They haven't proven to us why they have an incentive to like still spread this in its sense as well. But majorly, what do they tell us? They tell us that we ignore this like whole like Mahinda Rajapaksa and that kind of stuff, those like historical stuff that happened in the past, and fixate on stuff like Donald Trump. Even if this is the case, what you need to understand is, again, they've never proven to us why it's substantive like this important, right? Because at the end of the day, you don't necessarily, I'm taking this at a very worst case scenario. At the end of the day, we don't necessarily need to know about that kind of stuff. We need to live in the present, and at least the present stuff you'll be informed because this is the life you're living. And because of the proximity analysis that we brought you in our earlier speeches, you'll know about the present. The past isn't that important, and this is on a worst case scenario, right? the next part I want to talk about is stereotyping and this media manipulation tactic that they try to win on. I want you to understand that number one, counter narratives in American pop culture itself exist to a large extent, because I feel like Vishaka doesn't understand how broad and wide American pop culture is. It's extremely diverse, and it's extremely like and even though there's like Muslim stigmatization and woke propaganda, it is also progressive central, liberal central, and purely based on this fact is what this is what like encourages a discourse, right? Discourse leads to awareness. Why is this the case in terms of stereotyping and media manipulation? Within the US itself, there's countless call-outs. There's always people to go there and be like, hey, this is bad and this is good. And the delta here is the platform, right? Because in an absence of American pop culture, you don't have this extreme mass platform that's globally connected talking about the same issue. So the discourse and like awareness they have on their side in terms of the same issues is very different, purely based on the fact that we don't have that they don't have that platform. And secondly, even if there's like stereotype and manipulations, even if there's like stereotypes and stuff happening, you need to understand that countries, they utilize this to spread their own cultures as well. Because intuitively think about it, countries like India, sure, there's an Indian accent like stereotype spreading around, but there's also like a huge like booming in Bollywood media, Indian fashion. They utilize this kind of stuff, the meme cultures, and you like interconnect it to American pop culture to spread your own culture. These types of like net positives that you get out of this highly like outweigh the like useless like stereotypical stuff. Because even if it's a stereotype, it doesn't necessarily like kill you. And it doesn't necessarily kill you. Rather, you have like an improving your economy within India itself. And thirdly, stereotypes and manipulation is extremely worse on their side of the house. Because logically, think about it. In a world where there's an absence of like American pop culture, there's an absence of this mega huge platform that there's call-outs and stuff, right? The most important thing to understand is that people don't call out at the point at which there's no like pop culture thing. So what does their world look like? They're stuck in their own countries, local communities. It's like North Korea feeding to their people. They're given propaganda in a more like biased perspective of your country itself. Your country is you're gonna be living in an echo chamber within your culture in itself. Rather, with American pop culture, you have like an idea of like what a global standpoint where everything stands, and you have more access to information in this larger platform, right? But secondly, America is anyway going to try to be a global dominator, whether or not they export pop culture and stuff. They still want to rule the globe, right? And you need to understand stuff like this Israel stuff they try to pull. Is the only reason we can call it out is because of American pop culture. It's because we are provided the opportunity to see what they're up to. These call-outs are like manifested purely because the pop culture exists in itself. And second, and like fourthly, people don't call out American pop culture. That's just baseline BS. Because understand, people just meme on Trump and like shit on America 24/7. This is just like unrealistic. But anyways, how do we win this debate? It's in terms of social awareness. I want to impact this severity. With some severity, because understand the women in Pakistan without rights, suffering. These are the tangible like harms that are happening on their side of the house at the lack of American culture, at the lack of liberalization. There's severe impacts on their side of the house, and we stop this. We allow like people to have like rights and like make them aware that they also deserve the same like amount of pay that a man gets. We make sure that gay girls out there and boys out there like are free to come out and that it's okay to like the people of your same gender. And you ensure that these like people suffering and like slaving in there are made aware about the fact that they are doing it, and there's a sense of progressiveness happening, right? The severity of the suffering that's happening on their side is a huge delta. The way we win this is it's a large community that we have. This large community can spread this awareness. Why is it like effective? It's the buy-in, right? Because on their side, sure, you have like progressive like media as well, but they don't have the buy-in of like the tying it into like pop culture. Like this is the same culture that talks about fashion, that talks about the suffering of women. So it's an easier buy-in for people on our side. Those people are easily like incentivized to talk about this kind of stuff and easily talk about the problems that are prevalent within society. Second question on culture and media. And at the top of my speech, I want to ground this debate in terms of the fact that they never tell us why local culture is as important as they tell it to us. They only talk about how like niches lose their like local culture, but this is just baseline bullshit. 4 main levels of analysis. Number one, media exports and productions still exist, right? American pop culture is still a business because it's an export of media. Think about it. It's still a business. They have incentives to grab the highest and largest market they can and make the most money they can. How can you do it? Diversify the media, include other countries, Indian culture, Arab culture, like new fashion styles, this kind of stuff. This diversity captures so much more than anything else. Second, understand that the USA itself does not have a culture. They cannot even season their own food, right? Think about it. So the only way they can actually like propagate, the only thing American pop culture really is, it's a platform to utilize other cultures and like propagate the facts of other culture and like the diversities of other cultures. So we provide these platforms like utilize this to say belly dancing, hip hop, and the black culture community, Indian fashion again, like that kind of stuff. It's a platform for these people. Thirdly, people still like exotic stuff. The fact that Aditi is there playing the sitar today in a world where like Bombadino Crocodilo exists is proof that people are still into these niches. Even if pop culture exists, there's a huge market for niches purely based off the fact that pop culture exists, because it's a difference from the American pop culture. It's something exotic. There's so many investors for this kind of stuff. And fourthly, domestic markets still exist. Even if in the worst case there's elitism, you can still like have markets of like music and art within your own country. People still buy that stuff purely because of the fact that it's historically prevalent. Just because pop culture is there everywhere around the world doesn't mean like the paintings and all stuff disappear suddenly. That logical analysis has not been provided by their seventh house. We can unite the world with Skibidi Toilet. Please give it a side. Hilwood, yes.
I thank the speaker for their speech and invite the opposition reply to summarize their case.
Okay, am I clearly audible?
Yes.
Okay. I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. Panel, I myself am American. I think I know better than anyone why America is good for us. But before I get into the clashes, I want to note that they never grounded the impacts of culture aside from saying abstract things, right? This is a this house regrets motion, which means they needed to actually prove to us actual tangible harm which outweighed the benefits that we gave you. Given that they haven't done that, I think we just won the debate of the get-go. But there are 3 points where the debate then clashes. Firstly on awareness, secondly on culture, and thirdly in terms of media and the quality of media. Want to know that they never responded to most of what came in this clash. In terms of awareness, what they tell us here is that the local issues are completely forgotten on our side. 2 things. A, first thing, this is so intuitive, right? We're still curious about what we're proximate to. We still have to interact with the real world. If an election happens in our country, we don't think about goddamn Donald Trump. We think about Anurag Kumar and his Pudaru there, right? Secondly, this is negative because why do people inherently focus on local issues when you shift to local media as opposed to just things like baila music or borderline Sri Lankan brain rot? Then they tell us, oh, this is just going to propagate stereotypes. 2 responses. A, American media is incredibly wide, which means call-outs exist at the point at which you inaccurately represent someone, right? That then means when these call-outs happen, they happen on a mass scale, and it's such a mass scale that everybody realizes that something is wrong with the way America is portraying these people, right? This is impossible on their side because people just consume media within their own echo chambers, which means they are prey to their own biases and have nobody correcting them and telling them, okay, look, this is not how my people behave. But secondly, even if this is true, countries can utilize this to spread their own cultures, right? My third speaker and second speaker already explained this enough. I'm not going to waste my 4 minutes. They then tell us that, what they then tell us is that, oh look, liberalism inherently isn't a good thing. Panel, this is intuitively untrue, right? Liberalism is what saves those women in Pakistan from like being married off at 16 years old. It's what drives people to fight to throw out dictators and supreme leaders. It's what gives queer people an actual space to be themselves. But I'm going to be charitable and say, okay, maybe they do have this kind of media. Maybe liberalism didn't just drop from the polka half of America. But the issue is that, okay, sure, maybe this kind of media exists in niches, things like Mother Lanka and those trans movies. But this means the majority of people don't get access to it, right? And also I want to prove why this media is unlikely to be qualitative, which means sure, even if they have liberalism, it takes a longer time frame for it to propagate, which means they accumulate those harms. What does this mean for them? A, they don't negate any of our benefits enough to take out the scale of our benefits, so we still have all of that. And weighing on severity, this is actual tangible harm as opposed to a nebulous cultural harms. But secondly, they have no substantive push in terms of awareness, right? So these people just suffer continuously on their side with no way out. The last ditch response to this is, oh, America does evil things. Nobody calls out America. First of all, that's bullshit. I think everybody calls out America. I am American. I am calling out America. Secondly, sure, America does shit things on either side of the house, right? The difference then is that on our side of the house, we get to call America out because we see that America is doing shit things, and we have that incredibly large platform because of American pop culture, which means America can get called out on large scale. Second class in terms of culture, local culture still exists in niches, right? We still listen to Aditi play the sitar, people still listen to BNS, so this is just untrue, right? Aditi will listen to you play the sitar anytime. But secondly, America has no culture, right? America's culture is basically a melting pot of all the other cultures in the world. So your local culture is inherently somewhat reflected within American pop culture. This means we win the debate of the get-go, because we're the side that actually proves to you net good and actually weighs that against the harm that they showed us on their side. But even if awareness is baseline symmetric on both sides, they never contested any of our push-ups on why you gain more fulfillment from the qualitativeness of American pop culture and then media itself. This thing means we still have all of those impacts on our side of the house as to why you gain more fulfillment from this media, as to why you as a queer individual can find something like a queer community online, as to why you are able to gain like instantaneous and easier community with people based on what you know from American media. This is a unique path to victory because they never responded to it. Panel, I am American. I think that should win us the debate straight off the get-go. Just give us the trophy and give Viva la America.
I thank the speaker for their speech and invite the professional reply to summarize their case.
Am I audible if I speak like this?
Yes.
I'll be starting in 3, 2, and 1. Panel, because of Hillwood's insane amount of gaslighting, I had to listen to Saimi yelling in my ear for 8 minutes about the fact that she proved the things that Hillwood claimed she didn't. I want to first talk about like this really important point that she brought out that they're trying to undermine. Because we talked to you firstly about political manipulation, right? Because we weighed this to you again in Saimi's speech where we told you that the scale of impact is extremely harmful because America is a global superpower. At the moment you give them the authority and the power to like manipulate you regardless because you put so much trust into this type of media, and it's the only thing you consume. In your eyes, like New York is like the headquarters of the good guys or whatever, is the moment at which you buy into all of this and buy into that propaganda, completely unresponded to. We think the weight of this, the scale of harm is insane and they can't just let go of that. The second thing I want to address then is this like liberalism aspect that they want to bring up, because firstly they never proved to us why like liberalism is so important enough for them to push this and basically like let your culture die out because liberalism is this important. But secondly, the Americanized version of liberalism, why is that so important that you would let Sri Lankan culture and sitar players like go out of the job market or whatever, right? But I want to talk about like culture itself and tell you why culture is important, because Simon just told me that she told you why it's important for like 8 minutes. But firstly, it's simply the fact that it's something that is proximate to you, it's something you care about. Secondly, it's the fact that industries end up vanishing and dying out. People who want to actively like play the sitar should be able to play the sitar, but they're not going to have any outlet to do any of these things. But lastly, it's the fact that you are the only person as a country who can do your culture like better than any other country. You have a comparative advantage compared to like the US or whatever in terms of Sri Lankan culture. This is the one thing you're able to get money from. But then I want to like bring this down to the industry itself, because we think most of our benefits like mechanized here, when we told you that there's so much money flowing out of our country right now because we consume so much white girl music. The only movies we watch are like Zootopia or whatever, and we think because of this there's so much money like flowing out of the country. I want to weigh this, and like Simon already weighed this for you and told you how impactful it is, because the scale of harm to these countries is extremely harmful, because you're losing millions of dollars because you decide to like buy Hailey Bieber's like makeup over someone else's because you look up to these celebrities and not the celebrities within your own countries. This is a type of financial harm and that puts like Sri Lanka or whatever in a worse condition. But then this also ties in to the idea of like the quality and how like funding exists for their types of movies or whatever. We think these funds exist right now because people are actively buying into it. The moment you like let go of this global dominance is when you let Sri Lankan movies have the same or like at least to a certain standard amount of quality, because that is what the cost of promoting this dominance is on their end. But then I want to talk about representation, because this is something we are also winning on. Because at the end of the day, we all told you that stereotypes or whatever are the type of things that this dominance is promoting. We already told you that representation is better when it's representation through your own local media. When I see two gay people who are Sri Lankan is the moment at which I am able to better relate to this. But also simply the fact that I'm not going to associate gayness with being American and America is bad, so gay is bad. That is not the type of mindset I would have in like a world where American like media isn't a superpower and isn't like dominating everything else. But then I want to talk about how like these local issues are going to go underrepresented and political issues generally are not going to be talked about because they think a lesson in history is enough. I barely remember anything I did for O levels in history. I don't think this is like any justifiable enough for them to bring up. At the end of the day, you being able to talk to your friends like about political issues that happen in the country the same way you talk to them about like the Black Lives Matter movement or Mandani in like New York is the same way you're able to better like bring about political awareness and stuff in your own country, in your own local country. But then I want to talk about like this aspect of like for some reason local culture, and they want to really underplay it and tell us that local culture isn't important, and but they also in the same breath want to tell us that you can integrate things like Bollywood or whatever, and these are types of ways you get representation. I think in that case they need to concede to the fact that this local culture is important. But then also everything they said basically falls apart the moment that the third speaker comes in and tells you that the quality of media doesn't basically exist, even though their case is hinged on that, because they told us that that like Americans have unseasoned food. But I think that case is unseasoned at the end of the day. We think for these reasons we take this debate. For these reasons propose.
I thank the speaker for their speech and invite the exco to take over from here.
I thank the speakers for their speeches, and I cordially request all the adjudicators to move to their breakout rooms. Hello, everybody. We invite you to the awarding ceremony of Colonel Henry Steele Olcott's Memorial Debating Championship of 2025. We will now be announcing the top 10 speakers for this debate. Ranking 10th with a total speaker score, average total speaker score of 76.10 is Hillwood from Hillwood College Kandy A is Apurva Jinadasa. Ranking 10th with an average total speaker score of 76.1 from Bishop's College Team A is Safia Bakir. Ranking 10th with an average total speaker score of 76.1 from Bishop's College A is Krishel Pereira. Ranking 9th with an average total speaker score of 76.12 from St. Thomas College A is Yokit Pereira. ranking 8th with an average total speaker score of 76.17 from DS Team A is Sadev Muthuhetty. Ranking 6th with an average total speaker score of 76.20 from Visakha Vidyalaya Team A is Sayumi Vitharana. Ranking 6th with an average total speaker score of 76.2 from Trinity College Kandy Team A is Nimuthu Pathiraja. Ranking 3rd with an average total speaker score of 76.3 from Visakha Vidyalaya Team A is Aditi Vitharanage. Ranking 3rd with an average total speaker score of 76.3 from St. Bridget's Convent Team A is Mauli Kularatna. Ranking 3rd with an average total speaker score of 76.3 from Ladies College Team A is Tahira Sahir. Ranking 2nd with an average total speaker score of 76.38 from Trinity College Kandy Team A is Sanjita Vikrama. And last, ranking 1st with an average total speaker score of 76.50 from DS Team A is Vidat Marasinghe. Now, I cordially invite the best speaker for Olcott's 2025, Vidat Marasinghe, to deliver a few words.
All right, cool. Let me turn on my camera. Sorry that my name says Didumika. All right, cool. Children of the divine, you are not separate from your source. The longing you feel, the ache in your chest, the hunger for meaning, these are not signs of failure. They are the call of the divine within you, urging you to awaken to your own light. Remember this. It is the ego that perpetuates separation, guilt, and fear. God moves through every breath, every heartbeat, and in every face you meet. When you live in this awareness, separation dissolves, and you discover the truth the masters knew. You are the observer and the observed, the lover and the love itself. With that being said, on a serious note, I would like to. I'm sorry about my teammates. I would like to. Firstly, I am very, very proud of this achievement. First time in 5 years that I've gotten this. It is also quite convenient that I got absolutely every single position in a speaker tab aside from first this year. Aside from first and fifth, come second like 3 times, third like 3 times. So first one time is pretty cool. Hopefully, this is the first of many. I would like to thank my coaches and my teammates, and yes, Nuhan as well. Nuhan is my teammate, I'm sorry. all of them. Who wants a shout out? Naravanna wants a shout out. Yes, you can have a shout out. Okay, guys. Anyways, I'm very thankful for this award. Very good tournament, guys. Very good organizing amidst the situation as well. Thank you.
I thank Vidat for that amazing and awe-inspiring words, which has left all of us inspired for sure, right? And till the adjudicators give the verdict, please stay patient.
ඔයා මගේ නම් ජීවිතේම ඔයා මගේ නම්
සඳ වගේ මුහුණට පිටු පාලා ඉන්නට බෑ මට සැඟවීලා ඔබ නැති ලෝකෙක ඉපදීලා ඉන්නට බෑ මට ඔබ නැති නම් ජීවත් වීලා
ඉල්ල ඉල්ල ඇවිදෑත ඉල්ලා පන්න පන්න යනවාත පන්නා
සඳ වගේ මුහුණට පිටු පාලා ඉන්නට බෑ මට සැඟවීලා
ඔබ නැති ලෝකෙක ඉපදීලා ඉන්නට බෑ මට ඔබ නැති නම් ජීවත් වීලා
ඔයා මගේ නම් ජීවිතේ මල් ඔයා මගේ නම් ජීවිතේ මල් ඔයා මගේ නම් ජීවිතේ මල් ඔයා මගේ නම් ජීවිතේ මල්
හදවත ශෝකය කටුගාලා ඔබේ ඇස් පාරට මත්වීලා
ජීවිතයම පෙම් රස වීලා යමු අපි දෙන්නම රසඳ පානේ සැඟවීලා ඔයා මගේ නම් ජීවිතේ මල් ඔයා මගේ නම් ජීවිතේ මල් ඔයා මගේ නම් ජීවිතේ මල් ඔයා මගේ නම් ජීවිතේ මල්
ඔයා මගේ නම් ජීවිතේම ඔයා මගේ නම්
යන්න විට ඉංගසින්ද කස්සාලා කොහොමද ඉන්නේ ඉවසාලා ඔය ඉන්න වට මගේ අත දාලා යන්නට එනවද මගේ ආදරිය නොකර කතා
ඉල්ල ඉල්ල ඇවිදෑත ඉල්ලා පන්න පන්න යනවාත පන්නා
කුම්කුම අංජන තවරාලා ඔබ යයි සිසුමට පතුරාලා ඒ සුවඳින් මන මත්වීලා මා ඉන්නේ ඔබ සූසට මායම් ඉවසාලා
ඔයා මගේ නම් ජීවිතේ මල් ඔයා මගේ නම්
පටල ගත්ත ගීත ලොවම කලඹ ගත්ත බයිලා ගමුද රීමික්ස් කරලා බයිලා ගමුද රීමික්ස් කරලා බයිලා ගමුද රීමික්ස් කරලා එයාගේ මස්සිනා දැකලා මාව ඔරවලා යාල්පාන මෙන්ගෙනාව පිච්ච මලක් පරවෙලා යායට පායනා ඕය දාට එක් වෙලා වැත්තගේ දුවව අරන් පරලා ඔජාය කියා බයිලා ගමුද රීමික්ස් කරලා බයිලා ගමුද රීමික්ස් කරලා බින් මාළු වලේ කුසල් හාමි මාළු බාන්නට ගියා ඔක්ක ඇන්න ජෝන් සීන දැකලා නෑනේ මේ ඔයා කියලා කිව්වා රොක් වෙලා ගලපුලිය හැදුණු මල්ල හන්දානන දැන් ඔයා බයිලා ගමුද රීමික්ස් කරලා බයිලා ගමුද රීමික්ස් කරලා රාග තාල පටල ගත්ත ගීත ලොවම කලඹ ගත්ත බයිලා ගමුද රීමික්ස් කරලා බයිලා ගමුද රීමික්ස් කරලා බයිලා ගමුද රීමික්ස් your back this way in the back of the bus, the back of the jeep. I know you got this song on repeat. So put your hands up to the sky, wave them around from side to side. Baila, 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 baila. Savandari horen bala rambari va venkala, round kale supembari handa pandena panagiya. Ada taniyen makiya prathama haadu denna gihin kandala gala aapu hetiye marana velle taniguna. Baila gamuda remix karala. net nopiya balan hitiya nangila suwanda tiya malanga ada e connect pana giya baila gamuda remix karala baila gamuda remix karala raga taala patala gatta geeta logama kalama gatta baila gamuda remix karala baila gamuda remix karala baila gamuda remix karala gatta geeta logama kalama gatta baila gamuda remix karala baila gamuda remix karala baila gamuda remix karala hini pettatama naga jaya penna ජයනාද පැවක් ලොව හොල්ලා පෙරකාලෙ තරු වෙත හදබන්දා නබරැල්ලෙ තරු අද ජයගන්නා
තාරකාවන් සීටි ෂෙල්ටන් පෑව විස්කම් නෑමැකි අදත් පාවි විස්කම් තාරකාවන් තේජපාවි අපේ හදවත් මත් කරා සදා හැලේ
කොල්ලන් චැන්ටි කෙල්ලන් සති ගණන් පෙමින් පැදිලා ඉන්නන් හින්දි සින්දුයි ස්පයිකි කොණ්ඩේ කෙල්ලෝ දැන් බීච් පාටි ඉල්ලයි මේ පපරේ සද්දට බයිලා වසක් වස කොල්ලෝ පටියට ආවා පරල පද්දා නිතම කසා කෙල්ලෝ ගතියට ආවා
රුසරා රැසඳ ගඟනේ ඇත පායාවාගේ ආදරේ මාසරායා සියවර රෑ පේනවා සීනේ සැමදාරෑම රහසේ පායා මාගෙමයි රුසරායා එක්වරක් දෙවරක් මොහොතක් පාසා මට ආයෙත් ආයෙරුව බේනා ඇති තරම් මෙතරම් ලොවතරම් ඈ මට ඕනා එක්වරක් දෙවරක් මොහොතක් පාසා මට ආයෙත් ආයෙරුව බේනා ඇති තරම් මෙතරම් ලොවතරම් ඈ මට ඕනා රැපුරා ඇවත මනසේ පාටසේ අවහි ආදරෙයි මාසරායා හදවතමා යැනෙනවා ජීවිතේ හමු වූ සීන කුමරී සාරා ආදරෙන් මා බැඳේයා එක්වරක් දෙවරක් මොහොතක් පාසා මට ආයෙත් ආයෙරුව බේනා ඇති තරම් මෙතරම් ලොවතරම් ඈ මට ඕනා එක්වරක් දෙවරක් මොහොතක් පාසා මට ආයෙත් ආයෙරුව බේනා ඇති තරම් මෙතරම් ලොවතරම් ඈ මට ඕනා රුසරා රැසඳ ගඟනේ ඇත පායාවාගේ ආදරෙයි මාසරායා සියවර රෑ පේනවා සීනේ සැමදාරෑම රහසේ පායා මාගෙමයි රුසරායා කියපං උඹේ නොම්බරේ තන්දුරි කමුද නොදා බරබරේ වාකරේ කවුද ඉන්නේ ජරමරේ අම්පාරේ මල්ලි නිදිද කාමරේ ජම්බෝලේ වගේ ඉන්න සුන්දරා සම්බෝලේ කොටල ගමුද ලුණු දමා දංගොල්ලේ මාමා ඇවිත් මහකුණා ගස් පල්ලේ ඉඳන් බොමුද රාපෙරා රපඩ 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 එන්න මල්ලි නැගිටලා මෙන්න මල්ලි රස කතා පාම්බාගේ අපල ගන්න පේන්ඩි වත් කරලා ගන්න එන්න මල්ලි නැගිටලා එන්න නංගි හැඩ තමා එල්ලි වෙනකන් සින්දු කියමු රොක් වෙලා ලෝකේ තියෙන හොඳම සොමිය එලි වෙනකන් අපේ ජොලිය ගන්න නංගි එක් වෙලා කන්නඩි දැම්මත් නෑ හැඩ වැඩි කවුද මේක බාරගන්නේ අන්තිමේ ලොරි බාග මට දුන්නත් හුට පටේ මෙහෙම කටක් දැක්කෙම නෑ මේ රටේ උම්මානෙන් වතුර බොමුද සෝබනා අහඳ පානේ විරිදු කියමු රංජනා ලොරි බාගේ රවුමක් යමු රැවෙලා මරදානෙන් පරාට කමුලං වෙලා එන්න මල්ලි නැගිටලා මෙන්න මල්ලි රස කතා පාම්බාගේ අපල ගන්න පේන්ඩි වත් කරලා ගන්න එන්න මල්ලි නැගිටලා එන්න නංගි හැඩ තමා එල්ලි වෙනකන් සින්දු කියමු රොක් වෙලා ලෝකේ තියෙන හොඳම සොමිය එලි වෙනකන් අපේ ජොලිය ගන්න නංගි එක් වෙලා සෙල්ලං වලින් රට හොල්ලපු ලොකු සිරා ඇතුලේ ඉඳන් ඊයේ ඇවිත් ඒ හොරා ඒහා ගෙදර මැගි අක්කට හරිනා මට නං නෑ දිරවන්නේ ඔය කතා මුරලි දැම්ම හොඳට දුස්ර අඹරලා සනත් ගැහුව තිතට අනේ නැහිනා ජෝන් සීනා කාලා හොඳට පෙරේදා ඒත් වහලේ හිලෙන් වතුර ගැලුව රැපුරා එන්න මල්ලි නැගිටලා මෙන්න මල්ලි රස කතා පාම්බාගේ අපල ගන්න පේන්ඩි වත් කරලා ගන්න එන්න මල්ලි නැගිටලා එන්න නංගි හැඩ තමා එල්ලි වෙනකන් සින්දු කියමු රොක් වෙලා ලෝකේ තියෙන හොඳම සොමිය එලි වෙනකන් අපේ ජොලිය ගන්න නංගි එක් වෙලා එන්න මල්ලි නැගිටලා මෙන්න මල්ලි රස කතා පාම්බාගේ අපල ගන්න පේන්ඩි වත් කරලා ගන්න එන්න මල්ලි නැගිටලා එන්න නංගි හැඩ තමා එලි වෙනකන් සින්දු කියමු රොක් වෙලා ලෝකේ තියෙන හොඳම සොමිය එලි වෙනකන් අපේ ජොලිය ගන්න නංගි එක් වෙලා ඒ ගඳයිම කවුද
I'm sorry to be a stick in the mud, everybody, but the moment you all been waiting for has arrived. I am happy to say the verdict has been decided, and for that, I would like to cordially invite the adjudicating panel to state their verdict and following feedback.
Hello. So I am Sandil. I will be representing other adjudicators as well and giving the decision. So I will first announce the decision, then give a brief OA justifying the decision as well as what we thought the debate was about. And yes, that will be it on my end. So let me get started. So first to comment on the debate, we all agreed that it was an above average debate. Both teams brought out a lot of substantives. There was a considerable amount of engagement. There were examples and mechanizations. So that said, it was a somewhat close debate, and the final decision was a 2-1 split. So I will get to what actually led to that particular decision. So there were 3 main points of discussion within the debate. One was about how local culture, and by virtue of that, how people who depend on local culture or industries that depend on local culture, how those are affected. Yes, Gavin, I am happy to take your advice there. And secondly is this whole big question about like social issues, representations, and which paradigm has a better version of social issues and representation and all that folding out in reality. And finally, although carrying a little less importance, is this question about better quality media and like how that relates to better enjoyment or sense of community for people. So with regards to local culture, so the main driving arguments there were from side proposition, who talked about one, the loss of local culture itself. They talked about multiple mechanizations as to how this happens through elitism, shaming, popularity, etc., etc. And how because of that we have people who are unaware of our culture, who don't know music, who don't know history, whatever it is, and how like specific things within our culture are lost to this. And again, side option had responses there. One, questioning whether the alternative necessarily means that people will enrich themselves with local culture as opposed to just enjoy some marginal trivial thing like buy the music or whatever. And secondly, they push back the burden outside proposition to talk about what exactly is the quantitative or qualitative impact of losing local culture in itself, which the majority portion, which I for one didn't see like very strongly established by side proposition. And secondly, the second push closely related was that this also leads to local artists, local industry losing their fair market of jobs, losing audiences, and money flowing out of the country. Now, the argument about money flowing out of the country in itself stood out and was stood out pretty much towards the end of the debate. But with regards to local artists losing jobs, local industry using share, sorry about that, there was a fair amount of pushback, again talking about like how the alternative is not necessarily going to be helping them, but secondly also talking about how as of status quo there is a considerable amount of coexistence between the popular culture as well as the local culture, and how that like you can see a considerable amount of local industry in pretty much every country, and plenty of examples were given there. So one, I think that side opposition established or rather watered down some of the impacts side proposition had over there, and like the importance that it carries within the debate. And also side opposition took a stance claiming that worst case they were fine with some of the impacts to local artists and local industry, etc., as long as other benefits they talk about within the next clash point stand for them. So there was a within the dissent, within the 2-1 split, there was different amounts of importance given to the impact, but I think everyone agreed that there was some level of watering down done by these claims by side option there. Moving on to the next clash point about social issues. So there were multiple lines of argumentation here. We'll start with a few by side proposition. So one is this idea that US manipulates things to their advantage, both explicitly and it also propagates certain things that are not very helpful for people around the world, right? So one line of argumentation there is this whole idea about like how the US paints itself as the good guy and how that somehow leads to horrible situations where things like Israel's genocide of Palestine is not condemned or somehow portrayed within a positive light. But again, here side option has multiple claims to counter this. One is that call-out culture exists and that it is something unique to this whole global dominant American pop culture and how that in itself acts as a counterbalance to any whitewashing that America tries to do as itself being the good guy, where these people are already calling out things such as the Israel-Palestine issue in popular media. And second, they further water down the impacts of this by claiming that regardless of whether the pop culture of the United States was dominant, it would still be a global superpower and it would still be doing a lot to affect the ground situation or the today's situation within Israel, Palestine. So to some extent, then this will nevertheless happen. So like the harms are limited to just some amount of whitewashing, which they also water down. Again, how much importance that may carry is somewhat subjective, but we can all agree that it was somewhat watered down there. Secondly, they talk about things like stereotypes. For example, Indians within their Indians having their Indian accent and Russians being the bad guys. But the opposition there first points out that firstly that proposition doesn't show any active harms, for example, of Indians having like an accent, why that's actively harmful as opposed to other benefits that these things might bring, like, you know, wage gaps, inequality, human rights, or whatever. Secondly, they also claim that stereotypes can and will exist within local media as well. So then the impact is somewhat not exclusive to American dominated pop culture. And thirdly, they claim that inclusivity, or rather that the American pop culture industry, by virtue of catering to the global market and wanting to attract as much market share as possible, want to cater towards inclusivity, and how also on a second level, how that is fueled by call-out culture and how that is necessarily going to lead to things like addressing the problems that profession brings out, such as Indian accents or whatever it is. Now, of course, profession also tries to counter this further by talking about things like, you know what, how inclusivism is restricted to what the US sees within its culture, which again, side option tries to counter by talking about how, you know what, the US is a melting hot pot of culture, and there's a lot of back and forth there. But again, like with this, there is some level of watering down of the impacts that stereotypes like the Indian accent or whatever have as an active harm to society. Next, Proposition talks about how liberalism can come from local. Actually, before that, let's move on to the op argument there, which is that issues like so basically highlights like the major issues that liberalism and promoting liberal culture and promoting liberal ideas. So they talk about things like social equality, feminism, LGBTQ rights, basic human rights, labor rights, whatever, all of that. And here proposition has multiple lines of responses. One is along the lines of one is a very interesting line of response, which is talking about like the form of liberalism that the US pop culture propagates is suited purely for America and as not suited for other countries. For example, Eastern countries. Now, while this is a very interesting line of argumentation, we don't really see much substantiation of this point there by proposition. The second line of argumentation they have is that the idea of all these liberal values, the idea that there are things that are westernized or imposed upon us by Western culture harbors resentment about the more conservative people, and that creates an opportunity that creates a unique opposition to these particular values that would not have existed if the liberal values came through a local medium of some sort, like local pop culture or what it is. Now, this again addresses like the impact Ox's argumentation carries out about liberalism and its benefits. So again, like within the dissent, I think this how much weight it carried differed between judges, but ultimately it was watered down to some level by side proposition. Second claim then is that liberalism can come from local culture, which was a major push from side proposition, but side option also had counters to it. One along the lines of how there is going to be less quality, and a lot of this is tied to their analysis about the third clash, about why the US has better quality productions, but also side option necessarily shows us that a significant amount of what side proposition claims to be coming from local media is actually dependent on the US media. So because of that, they show that liberalism itself more realistic within status quo. All of the liberalism that is coming out of local media is solely dependent on American media, and they give some more lines of analysis as to why it's necessarily not going to happen that way. So they greatly water down the impact coming from the idea that what liberalism can come from local culture. Finally, the final and last point that side prop has within this issue is this whole idea that this makes issues that are discussed US centric. For example, talking about Mamdani and Trump instead of Mahinda Rajapaksa or LTTE. And again, OP has multiple counters here. One is that the alternative doesn't necessarily mean someone will pick a history book. Maybe they'll just listen to music or trivial nonsensical stuff. Secondly, that by virtue of proximity itself, you will anyway be paying attention to these things, even if you also pay attention to Donald Trump and Mamdani. And finally, they talk that representation for vulnerable people or things that affect minorities, for example, the Tamils in Sri Lanka, the effects that they get will not be brought out by local media regardless, and also that the only way that kind of thing is going to be called out is by the call-out culture that is promoted by the US dominant culture. So based on all of that, I think all of these points carried a lot of weight in the debate, and these were the points that mainly led up to the decision. The third clash point was about like better quality things, but I think I've taken a long time with OS, so I will not talk about it. Mainly following that we didn't really compare it, give that much significance to its impacts because not much comparison was done with the other two clashes. So that being said, with a 2-1 split, the decision goes to side option, which is Hillwood College Kandy. Yes, you may upload them, whatever, and over to you, Exco.
Thank you, Sandhir, Aya, for that feedback and verdict. And I would like to thank you all for joining this. And I would like to start in the debate and in this event with a vote of thanks, right? Uh, it has been a very wonderful time to meet all of you, and it has been really joyous of us to end this event in very successfully. The third installation of Colonel Henry Steele Olcott's Memorial Debating Championship, and it has been an amazing experience putting this all together, even amidst the current situations that you are all aware of. So, first of all, a very big thank you to all of you here today. All of you debaters have made this possible, because without you, this not this would not have been possible. And I would also like to thank all of the adjudicators that are present, because you have been crucial and your input has been valuable in making this event possible. And a huge thank goes to Navaloka College of Higher Education, who has graciously sponsored this event. And I could not go without thanking the Dharmaraja College OBU, especially its president, Mr. Nisanta Allepola, secretary, Mr. Salia Dahanayaka, and a special thanks to Mr. Kosia Gunavarthan for supporting us to make this event successful. We are also deeply grateful for our teacher in charge, Mrs. Thalata Kulatilaka, and all of our past presidents who have created this path for us and guided us through. And congratulations to Hillwood College Kandy for taking the win for the 25th third installation of Colonel Henry Steele Olcott's Memorial Debating Championship. And I'm hoping to see all of you here today in the next iteration in 2026. Wishing you all a very good night. Thank you.